Have you figured out your niche? Are you helping adding value to other people's lives? Then you're in the right place. Welcome to Munira's Musings with your host, co-author of Conversations with Top Real Estate Investors Volume 3, Munira Zahabi.
Munira's Musings with another edition and a new guest today. Hi, Matt. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Good. So Matt here is a veteran. He is a police officer. He is an author. He is a podcaster. He is wearing 30 hats, in his own words, every single day. So we want to hear what he is talking about. But before we do, I want to tell you a little bit about myself. I am the niche navigator, and I help people align their skills to then create the niche that they've had a passion for, that they've been harboring. And it essentially becomes niches to riches, right? And that's what we were trying to do, make wealth for ourselves, not only with money, but also with relationships and social life and love and everything else that matters to us. Munira's Musings came about when I found people who were doing extraordinary things in the world, and I thought I could be that voice that sends out this message because somebody out there needs this person. And so that became so excited that you're here, honored and humbled to have you on my show. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, first of all, thank you. And I love the fact that you have a calling to share great stories. And I consider myself somewhat of a storyteller, and I enjoy having people that can tell their story on my show as well. And my mom told me years ago, she's a retired English teacher, when I decided to write my memoir, and I hadn't read a book. And the only book I'd read was 9th grade Animal Farm. And she says, well, just remember, son, everybody has a story to tell, but not everyone can tell their story. And I thought about that. And she goes, I believe you were given a gift to tell your story. So being able to share stories is important. And I appreciate that that's the kind of show that you have.
Well, my purpose in life is to find people's niches, right? And if they don't have a niche, I'm the person that they come to, because my job is to lay the foundation. That's what I do. I excavate and then I lay the foundation. And that's what I want to do. They can grow up from there. My job is because everybody has had a trial and a struggle and how they overcame it. So by doing these interviews, there is somebody who is going through it, and they need to hear that they shouldn't give in and throw in the towel, right? So that's my purpose. So tell us about your book. You said you were 31, so you're not 31 now.
No.
And then you have evolved into a podcaster and a storyteller. So tell us that journey. Take us on that journey.
Yeah, so my life has been very eventful, to say the least. I've had a rebirth in my life, which was in 2002. But prior to that, I was living outside of Philadelphia with my mom. My mom was a single mom raising me and my brother, Andy. My brother, Andy, was autistic and stuttered. And even though he was 3 years older than me, I was the older brother by proxy, just because of his inability to socially interact, his age, for lack of a better way of putting it. Growing up with him was amazing. My brother was the most peaceful, loving, caring, kind, pure person I've ever known. And unfortunately, in 1989, on July 12th, 1989, my brother was killed in a car accident.
Oh, no. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Single worst day of my life still to this day. Unfortunately, I didn't really have a chance to deal with it after it happened, because a month later I left for the Army. And while it was a great escape for me to get into the military and not have to deal with the trauma of losing my brother, it certainly didn't help me with the feelings I was having inside of myself, of guilt, of anger, lots of rage. And I spent the next 13 years sort of living in my own head, trying to figure out how to get out of it. And after you have that traumatic moment, and looking back on it now, the PTSD is a real knowledgeable thing. I had PTSD, and PTSD is no different for someone who lost a sibling or a loved one than a soldier. The reality is once you lose something tragically, but you weren't prepared for, sometimes your body and your brain don't handle it as well as it should. So that's kind of what I went through for about 13 years. In 2002, I was given an opportunity by God to forgive myself. And I say that because I'm a very spiritual guy, and I believe that God has a very large part of how my life goes. And I was given a quilt, of all things, in 2002, made out of my brother's clothes. That was the first thing that I was able to hold of my brother in a very long time. And being able to have that sort of just opened up this floodgate of emotions. And that night I went down and I wrote 26,000 words of memories about my brother, the most clear and concise memories I've ever had. And I wrote them down that night. And I came up the next morning and I felt better. I saw sunlight coming through the kitchen window for the first time. Like I really noticed color in the rays of light and the flecks of dust. And I just thought it was amazing that how brilliant that was. Like it stood out to me. And that began this new journey of who I am. So that transformational moment was that night when I wrote those words and allowed myself to just sort of have my moment of dealing with my brother's death. And that turned, those 26,000 words became the basis for the book that I wrote in honor of my brother called A Brother's Love, a memoir. And what I realized during writing that book was that I had lost my purpose. My purpose growing up was protecting my brother. I literally every day of my life was pretty much a fist fight with somebody who was making fun of my brother. And you know, we grew up in low income housing, and so things weren't necessarily always rosy. And when he died, I lost that. And I tried to replace it with the military and serving, protecting as an officer and SWAT and being a federal air marshal after 9/11. And none of those things were filling that void. I still had that depression, that anger, that rage. And after I got that quote from my grandmother, things sort of changed. And it allowed me to begin to realize that I have a new purpose, which was to share my brother's life and his story. And that turned into what I'm doing now, which is as a podcaster and an inspirational speaker and mentor to kids. And there's so many things that came out of being able to share my brother's story in such a way that it was so impactful. I found out when my brother died, and I tell this story every time, and I have to tell it every time. When my brother died, at his funeral, there were 1,000 people. Our family is dysfunctional. We don't have a whole lot of people in our family. And my brother never had a single person call and ask him to come out and play or come out for a sleepover or invite him to a party. And I remember thinking, who were all these people at my brother's funeral? And it turns out that when my brother worked every summer at a camp that a family friend ran, it was a Christian camp, and he would cut grass and did things every summer, and he would stay there. And he met all these people over those summers. And all those people were touched by my brother's life and his magnificence and his purity and his kindness, so much so that they all showed up at his funeral. And I didn't find out about that. I didn't know who they were until many years later when I started writing the book. And then all these people started writing me and telling me stories after they read the book about how they named a kid after my brother, or they built a gymnasium at the camp where my brother worked and named it after him. And when you think about a 21-year existence, struggling with autism and struggling with the severe stutter, I mean, so bad his eyes would roll in his head, his face would contort. You wouldn't equate that with 1,000 people showing up. But he did. My brother impacted lives in a way that I can't even imagine. My first 21 years, if I'd had 10 people show up at my funeral, I'd been lucky. And I now realize that my purpose is to continue to share the greatness that my brother was, and the lives that he impacted, whether he knew it or not, are now being impacted tenfold by his story. And it's allowed me to go on this journey now where I've created my own niche. And you know, I believe that my niche is literally my unique story and how I share that. I'm not trying to be Tony Robbins or any other inspirational speaker or motivational speaker or anybody like that. I'm just trying to be Matt Cubbler and share my brother Andy Cubbler's story in a way that allows people to feel something real at the moment when I'm sharing it. And that connectivity with human beings is real important.
And that's true, because these days, when we have our cell phones with us all the time, we have forgotten how to connect, right? And Simon Sinek talks about that a lot. And I've noticed that the generation that's younger than all of us is forgetting how to connect. and we need to teach them. It's a new skill that we need to teach them. And I love the inspiration that you have. So what do you, when you talk and inspire young students, you said you speak at schools, what do you talk about?
I honestly do it. The exact same conversation I have with CEOs, I have with fifth graders.
Okay.
I believe that if you try every single day to live a life of selfless service, you will be remembered when it's done. I think the greatest thing I learned about my brother's life was he didn't know that he was impacting those lives. And I didn't know that brother who was impacting those lives didn't live at my house. He lived at that camp. Or at least I didn't see that version of him. Like yeah. I didn't see my brother in that way. So I missed out on those moments of my brother's greatness. And I didn't find out about him until after he was gone. And I don't ever want anyone ever to worry about whether or not another person knows of their impact in their life. I don't ever want anyone to sit in a church and go, who the hell are all these people? When I die, there's going to be a room full of people, and they're all going to be there with the same understanding and knowledge of why they're there. And no one's ever going to ask, why am I here? And who are all these people? And it just oozed out of him. And sometimes it was a little reckless with his decision-making, but he was the most pure human being I ever knew. And when I go into schools or I go into companies and talk to corporate people, I share that. I'm like, listen, if you just get up every day and you have a plan to go out and help people every day without wanting anything in return, if your day's ended tomorrow and God calls you home, you will be remembered and your legacy will be lasting. And it's not about how much money you make. It's not about what kind of car you drive or how big your house is. I believe all those things happen as a result of greatness, that things that you put out into the world and help people with. I spend more of my life volunteering my time for other people than I've ever spent making $1. And I don't want for anything. I'm not rich, but I don't want for anything. I work for my money. I make sure that my family's provided for. And every day I go to bed, I know that that day I made an impact, even if it was just one person. And that's the thing I try to impart on kids. Leadership, a lot of people look at leadership as if it's some kind of a major title or ranking or something like that. And literally leadership is just helping other people find success without wanting anything in return. That's all.
Paying it forward is what I call leadership.
But people don't listen to that. They think leadership is bossing people around or standing up in front of a classroom and speaking. You can be a leader and do those things, but leadership in and of its essence is simply just caring enough about someone else and their success before your own. That's
true. You're very right. So you said something that I need to ask you. You said people are jaded, right? And in comparison to your brother, and he had his heart coming out of his body. How do you think that people become jaded?
First of all, it's a learned experience. Whether it's, I would say 90% of it's fear. Fear of what they don't know or don't understand, whether that's racism or religious persecution, or if you're homeless and people look down on you, or because they're afraid of you and your situation. And I've seen it with people who have disabilities. My brother, people would treat my brother poorly, I think not because they didn't like my brother, because they were afraid of having that knowledge of who he was and why he was like that. People don't want to find out. And that creates that jadedness. And I think that creates that divide where people can't communicate, because our preconceived idea of what's going on in their life or who they are doesn't allow us to have that connection. And when I go into schools, I really stress to kids that if they spent 1 hour a day just thinking about someone else other than themselves, their mind would open up into 500 different things. I have my kids do exercise, especially the ones I mentor. I have them write down every day, their journal, right? But not just a ho-hum, this is what I did today. Identify moments where you could have helped somebody, whether it's held the door for somebody, or someone's walking into the convenience store and they're coming from the gas pumps 30 feet away and you waited until they got there and they said, wow, thank you. You didn't have to wait. And that moment, they were appreciative. They stood out that you waited. Like those little things, when you start to pay attention to the little things, the big opportunities become very, very clear. My grandmother forced me to connect with her that day, because normally I would have just been completely shut off to that, and it would have been like, great, a quilt put it in the box. But something happened and it saved my life. And that's moving forward in my life for the last 16 and a half years. I've literally been driving myself every single day towards ensuring that I never go backwards to the 13-year period, that I'm always growing and living and loving and enjoying my life and doing things that bring joy to other people. And as a cop, that's sometimes hard. I'm not always the nice guy. I've been, on top of being a full-time cop, I'm an entrepreneur. I own a company that manufactures, I have 3 patents. We manufacture equipment that's in the strength and conditioning and neurological neuromuscular rehabilitation. And, being able to take all the things I've learned throughout my life and the people that I've helped and understanding how the brain works and how the body works has allowed me to become a successful entrepreneur in a way that I would have never thought. I mean, I don't have money in my family that I can draw from. I don't have the ability to go out and get a $300,000 loan. But God placed someone in my life that allowed me to borrow money from him and go out and pursue this entrepreneurial endeavor back in 2009 during a recession, which I don't recommend. But we're 11 years later, we're still running strong. And it's all these things that God has put in my life are helping people. There's not a single thing that I do in my life that doesn't have an overriding mantra of help. And that's the thing that I really, truly enjoy. And when you step back and take a look at your life, it's not necessarily, there's not a single moment in your life that's individualized. Everything's connected. One thing always leads into the other, and you are where you are when you're supposed to be there.
Each step that you took was a struggle. Yes, it is, but it's not impossible. So like when you are saying this, that thoughts are coming back to me, because it is not impossible, but you just have to figure out where you're going from here, because you take what you have, and that's what I do, is right, align your skills along the way that you've acquired and then repurpose them into what you want to do, right? And that's what you're doing too.
Learn how to understand the difference between faith and trust. Faith is hoping that it's going to happen. You just have this, I'm going to put my faith in you that it's going to happen, but you don't necessarily know it. And trust is knowing where you're going and it's going to happen. And I've been able to transition my life from faith or hope to trust. I trust in myself. I trust in the path I'm on. I trust in my talents and skill sets and the journey I've been through to put myself in a position where I'm always going to have an opportunity to be successful and help people.
Perfect. So how do people find you?
My website, mattcubbler.com, has everything you need to know about me and the book and speaking and the podcast. It's all on there. The podcast is 2 dates and a dash podcast. Everybody looks at me and goes, what the hell does that mean? Your life's made up of 2 dates, the date you're born and the date that you die. And your dash is what matters. That's your life. And what you do with it means something. So that's the nature of the podcast, where I just feature people kind of like you who are doing amazing things and really have a story to tell and can tell it well and inspire people. Max Out, which is my company that does the strength training equipment. That's Max Out Equipment, MAXOUT equipment.com. So those are the places you can find me. I'm everywhere.
Any last words for our listeners?
If everybody just wakes up every single day with the single intention of helping another person, that will spurn a seed inside of them that will grow. And that feeling that you get when someone says thank you, or you just see in their face that relief that thank God someone was here for me, that will grow inside of you and it'll make you want to do it more. And I didn't mention that my speaking company, the brand for my speaker, inspirational speaking world, is I Got You. And that came from a friend of mine who said, you are the only person I can always count on to have my back. When you say I got you, it means something. And it just resonated in me. And I said, you know what? I do say that all the time. Everybody says anything that they need help. I'm like, all right, don't worry, man, I got you. And that's who I am. And that's, if everybody had that mantra where they had somebody's back, that were there as a support person or a support network for that person, their lives would be so fully enriched that it really wouldn't matter what else was going on in their world. That overriding feeling of joy and connectivity is what will resonate at the end of the day.
See, from the man who wears 30 hats a day. It's like that Lucy episode when they go to this place.
Yes, I remember that episode.
But
we're old.
Yeah, but the thing is, you show up for that person for that particular moment. Give up your seat on a bus, or hold somebody's cart while it's flying away in the wind. I live in Chicagoland, it's always doing that. So one, you save the person from running if the person is older, and two, you help other person's car not get hit, and just say, okay, I'll just take this car because I need it. I don't want to walk all the way. But so there's three purposeful, but those little things help, because that smile that somebody gives you is enough.
I agree.
Right? Thank you so much. I appreciate it. We will find Matt Cubbler. If you can put your website down after this interview is over, we'd appreciate it. Thank you so much. And for those of you who are interested in being on my show, please go ahead and contact me. And if you want to do something for me, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel, because we are waiting for a message from you to you. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Munira's Musings with your host, Munira Zahabi. If you enjoyed our show, please share and subscribe to this channel. And for more content, please join our Facebook group,